Okay, Harris, thank you for helping us technically to come together. And I know a lot of our students are exhausted from their finals and getting their grades. And we are recording this session, so with an eye towards sending out this presentation to all of our students after the fact, and certainly making it available on our racial justice website in the next few days, so that all of our students and alumni have a place to go to listen to this important conversation. But let me just say at the beginning here that for our BSU students and our alumni, congratulations on so successfully navigating one of the most challenging academic years we've seen in the history of Bridgewater State University. If we've overcome more in our 181-year history, I would be surprised compared to what we overcame in the past 15 months. And if adversity makes us stronger, we're all going to have superhuman strength and be very powerful people in the years ahead. So let me just say, well done. And thank you all for leaning into your education and for leaning into Bridgewater State University. Today's meeting has a singular focus, and that is the release of the recommendations of the Special Presidential Task Force on Racial Justice. As we all know, the catalyst for this work, the beginning of this work, followed the murder of George Floyd almost 1 year ago. It was student voices that were heard the loudest on this campus. Black Lives Matter protests, Say the Names. And in those protests, I heard something that I hadn't heard before. And students had said right in front of Boyden Hall here that Bridgewater State University has to do better, that I had to do better. That stopped me in my tracks, shook me out of a belief that we were doing enough. And clearly we weren't, if students felt that they didn't have a sense of belonging. These recommendations that you'll hear today do build upon a solid foundation of work that's been undertaken by this campus for 20 years. I referenced that work in my email communication that came out earlier this week. Bridgewater is seen across the Commonwealth right now as a leader in racial justice and equity practices. But after carefully listening to and hearing our Alana students over the past year, we've all come to realize that as a university and as individuals, our students are right. We can do better. And that's why this task force was formed, and it's why we're all here today. I want to thank our task force co-chairs, Trustee David Alexander, Faculty Emerita, Dr. Carolyn Petrosino, and our Senior Fellow for Civics and Social Justice, Dr. Mary Grant. And for anyone on this call that doesn't already know, Dr. Grant is the President-elect of the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, and we're all incredibly proud of her. And we wish her the very best as she moves on to her next challenge and work with all of us as a colleague at a different institution. But thank you all for your hard work and determination and passion, and for those Tuesdays with Mary conversations that have happened every week for the past nearly 1 year. I also want to thank our vice chairs, our committee leaders, and to the 70 members of the task force and the 1,000 folks across campus that leaned in to support this important work. I particularly want to thank our students for their involvement, their passion, and for their leadership in pushing this institution to be a better institution in the months and years ahead. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce one of the hosts of today's event, Dr. Mary Grant. Mary?
Thank you, President Clark, and thank you all for taking the time to get a brief overview to the process that we engaged in, look at the recommendations, and to hear from some of the members of the task force who worked so hard and so passionately over the last several months to bring this to the campus community. President Clark, I want to thank you for the trust that you put in the task force in doing this work. As I've looked at college campuses across the country, I am deeply impressed and moved by the extent to which you trust your campus to do this work. You turned it over to us, and we have a great report and recommendations to turn back to you. So thank you very much for that and for the opportunity. I want to echo Fred's thanks of David Alexander and Carolyn Petrosino, who served as co-chairs. We did meet every Tuesday morning for coffee and conversation, and I'm sure hoping those friendships continue. I want to thank the vice chairs, Jakari Griffith, Sydney Marrow, Samantha Joseph, and Anna Class, who's graduating, member of the class of 2021. Congratulations to you, Anna, and thank you to all the vice chairs. There were 6 subcommittees that served the task force, and each of those subcommittees was chaired by a wonderful pair of co-chairs, and they really took time to knit together the report of each of the subcommittees to bring the groups along. They worked long, hard hours along with the members of their subcommittees, but I would like to give a special nod to the subcommittee co-chairs, Diana Fox and Jenny Shanahan, Diane Bell and Jabril Solomon, Jabara Alabodi and Joyce Rain Anderson, Sabrina Gentle Warrior and Emily Portello, Sydney Marrow and Michael King. Also early in the process, Brenda Molife was part of that subcommittee co-chair pair, and Pam Russell and Gabriela Rivera. Many thanks to all of you. And a very special thanks to Jill Beckwith, Director of Operations from the Martin Richard Institute for Social Justice. Jill was the glue that helped hold us all together, and I want to thank her for her excellent work and leadership. Thank you to Lisa Shaw and to Isabel Bourget as well for their supports along the way, and to everybody on campus who had a hand. As you look at this report, you will see several pages of acknowledgements, and we attempted to thank everybody. And for those that we missed, we apologize and we thank you as well. When we began this work, we were looking at the crisis that was unfolding across the country. We were doing it under the backdrop of a pandemic. And we knew that we had much work we needed to do to build upon Bridgewater's values adopted in 2015 around being an equitable institution, grounded in treating each other with respect and dignity, but to ensure that we were indeed building on that foundation to enhance our beloved community. We knew that we had work to do. And President Clark put together the task force to take a look at what was happening on our campus community. And what you will see as you have time to go through the report and you hear from members who put it together this evening is that this is not a perfect outcome. What it is it's a deep self-examination of who we are as an institution, where we can do better, and what we must work on. So I really just want to thank everyone for all they put into this. And the charge that President Clark gave to all of us was that we needed to take this time to be introspective, to develop thoughtful recommendations, to be honest in how we were doing our work, and most importantly, to develop an action agenda to make change. And that is what's contained in the report through the recommendations. And as we turn it over to President Clark and the Board of Trustees and the campus to do that work, we know that we are moving from words not being enough, that we must do better, and we will do better. And so as you hear next from David Alexander, Samantha Joseph, Jakari Griffith, and Sydney Marrow, you'll get some insights as to how we constructed the process, the way we did our work, how we centered students' voices, and how this was grounded in a deeply held set of values. So I'm now going to turn it over to David Alexander, who will begin to walk us through some of the process that we followed.
Thank you very much, Mary. I truly appreciate the opportunity to serve on this task force. Thank you to President Clark and the entire campus community that supported all these efforts. You know, on the last slide, we saw that words alone were not enough. And you know what? The slide could have ended right there. You know, the Declaration of Independence itself, you know, inspires us with these words of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But then what happens in action is that the Constitution ends up legitimizing the idea that some of our ancestors were 3/5 a person. That is the dichotomy that we live with sometimes. The idea that something is going to be told to us or said to us, and then what happens is it falls flat on its face in terms of action and results and impact. I have the confidence, I have the hope that in what I've seen thus far, in the indicators, the early indicators that have come forth through all of our efforts, our culminating effort, that this is indeed not lip service, but indeed something that speaks towards accountability, commitment, empathy, and more than just a desire to do better, but a conviction, a true conviction to be better. We analyzed and looked at what are the elements of policy, practice, and culture that are impeding racial justice at BSU. It wasn't something that was taken lightly. The idea was we were going to turn over every single rock. We were going to look towards the sprawling aspect of the university and the campus itself. Even in the midst of a pandemic, there was not a situation where we imagined ourselves saying, hey, well, we'll back off from that because we can't actually talk to that person or get to that person in a very easy way. What we were trying to do is get towards and get through to what is impeding our efforts to really deconstruct racialized aspects of Bridgewater State University. and how we can move towards corrective action. So when you see this report, you'll see, a culmination of a lot of effort across the entire campus that really looks towards providing some real steps, real action, real impact towards taking corrective action that we can advance. The guiding values and principles, kind of our core operating values on a daily basis that we look towards was these that you see here. And in these core values, every decision that was made, there were times where in building this kind of subcommittee, if you imagine, of these task force members, these 70 people working hard to really uncover some difficult and sometimes just things that you didn't want to talk about. We're bringing them to surface. And you can imagine that there's conflict, there's tension, there's emotions, there's feelings, and there's real experience of people. Anytime we found ourselves in a decision point that we found difficulty, or we found it hard to figure out the path of what the truest right thing to do, we fell back on these values. We look towards honesty, truth, empathy, dignity, unity, and equity as our calling card, as our decision maker, as the finger that would tip that scale in either direction. It would be based on these values. And throughout the process, we committed to just different elements, countering the institutionalization of racism by calling for new institutional structures, not the same ones, but how can we deconstruct our structure and then reconstruct something that actually works for everybody on campus. We were being transparent in our initiatives, programs, and even simply our language. What our words meant to each other. What was it that we were actually saying to each other? What nomenclature were we used to describe someone, their identities, or otherwise, something that they held true as an artifact to themselves? We were unafraid of being transformative. We weren't fearing any retaliation or uncovering of ourselves or exchanging positive change for the comfort enjoyed by majority power structures. In other words, we were given the freedom to do what we were asked to do. And again, we thank you, President Clark, for doing that. And not to sound cliche, but we use the power of our very talents, experience, and essentially love to better this community. So to continue describing what we saw as this process, I'll turn it over to Samantha. Thanks.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Mary, and thank you, Fred. Beyond just what we saw, we vowed to also be strong pillars of the BSU Foundation because we genuinely care and we genuinely had passion to make changes that needed to occur. We had, like David said, we had a lot of difficult conversations, but we all found a common ground in those difficult conversations in order to see and make change that needs to occur on the Bridgewater campus. We were courageous. We had a lot of feelings. There was a lot of feelings that was talked about throughout our meetings. There was a lot of, but there was one thing that always kept us together. It was our love for our community, our love for Bridgewater, and our love to make a change for social justice. And I'll turn it over to Jakari.
Greetings. I'd like to build on what Trustee Alexander and Ms. Joseph shared, that this was a radical act of love, to be introspective, to be thoughtful, to become more aware of the ways in which we could better our community and create an environment that was conducive to the growth and development of our students. That being said, we really began this work recognizing that our success as a task force would be completely dependent on the involvement of our many talented staff, students, and faculty across the campus. So it was important for us to be as inclusive as possible and to really create a space that would allow as many people to participate in these efforts, both formally and informally. Our work, the work that is presented here, the work that is evident in the 441-page report, that work was the result of many selfless people who had the conviction, who were determined, who demonstrated through their willingness, their desire to make this community better, to share new ideas, to be vulnerable, to engage one another with openness, and most importantly, to be authentic. This was in and of itself a positive change. Key to our success, however, was devising a process that was credible, and that meant having a structure that was totally transparent. Trustee Alexander highlighted our core conviction to love. Ms. Joseph also highlighted one of our other core convictions, love. This was really important because it gave us the space to ask really tough questions, to share uncomfortable truths, to rethink assumptions and existing positions, to go where the data led us, to really be exploratory in our acts. But more importantly, it was our regular exchanges, our regular updates to the broader campus community that also made us smarter. These two were essential. We discovered that by sharing information, we deepened our ability to connect to the campus. This allowed us to engage in a more rigorous, systematic analysis of the lived experiences of our students, our staff, and our faculty. It allowed us to ask the tough questions. What could we do better? What are we getting right? And the community became our thought partners. They are interwoven through the text of our final document and in this presentation here. Their voices guided this work. But it's important to highlight the importance of a rigorous approach based on best practices, based on sound and proven methodologies, based on rock solid conclusions. The data that is presented this evening, the data that is contained in this report, the conclusions that follow that data, all of these are grounded in an empirical reality, free of prejudgment and assumption. And we have used that data as a springboard to offer our community solutions and to answer deeper questions about how to best move forward in a way that is inclusive, in a way that is celebratory, in the way that enables the positive growth of every individual on our campus, in a way that makes our campus the beacon of hope on the South Shore and the state of Massachusetts. It is honesty and love and those convictions that guided us through. As a consequence of that love, we also got to know one another frequently and often. Our task force met together well over 12 times within the past 10 to 11 months. That initial meeting and discussion point started in August. We've had more than 20 campus communications, providing updates to those people we care about, students, alums, community members, staff, and faculty alike, about what we were doing, what we were up to, what they could expect from us, and how we were moving through our process. We presented to the Board of Trustees. We had a town hall in February. And while this graphic may be overwhelming, this just really documents the conviction and the passion that we approached our work by way of all of our various meeting points and how many times we came together to talk about this really important issue and topic. But we didn't start from scratch. In fact, our positions were deeply informed from the voices of our campus community. These 6 subcommittees were developed based on themes that emerged from multiple events, multiple conversations, and multiple causes of actions. We scrutinized the calls to action and the deep desires from change from students, staff, faculty, and like, and these subcommittees surfaced from that data. And here, this is a graphic to illustrate how far-reaching our efforts were. We wanted to engage very intentionally every member that we could from across campus. We wanted them to be involved. We wanted to create an inclusive space. We wanted to turn over every rock and be exhaustive as possible in our search for ideas and pathways forward. And we wanted to be thoughtful. This meant that we had to have at least one student on every subcommittee. This meant that we issued a formal call to the MSCA soliciting volunteers to participate in our exchanges and in the committee itself. This meant that we canvassed and went across various colleges and divisions looking for talent and people with insight, with devotion, with commitment to move our charge forward. This also meant that we spanned organizational hierarchy, focusing on those who are tenured and untenured, focusing on those that are from the community and those that are internal to our community, focusing on alumni and community citizens, focusing on all walks of life, and most importantly, focusing on those people who have an enduring love and connection to BSU. We wanted them to be a part of this experience. We wanted them to help shape the narrative that will give life to a new BSU of tomorrow. This graphic, which I referred to as a Christmas tree in a previous presentation, really reminds me of Christmas lights. So I should just point that out. But this is intended to really spell out to you in graphic detail the intentionality that was behind the process, and also look at the structure that guided a lot of the work. At the center, certainly we have President Clark and his incredibly awesome charge to make BSU a better place. And circling around him are many thought leaders, going from the inner ring certainly to the outer rings. This was an inclusive, exhaustive process. And were it not for the dedication of these members and those persons that perhaps are not identified on this slide, we wouldn't have the document that we have today. And here I'd like to turn this over to my next colleague.
Thank you for that, Jakari. This slide is an illustration of the voices of our Alana students that informed the work of the 70+ people who comprise the 6 subcommittees that were just previously referenced. We were guided by the courage of these students to speak out against injustice and their desire to create a future that they so rightly deserve. As you read these quotes, you can feel their weariness. You can taste the bitterness of not being believed. You can empathize with their loneliness and their longing for inclusion and acceptance. The fruits of our labor were born of the seeds of these voices and made fertile by the national climate. Our students' charge was a moral imperative that challenged us to pay heed and take action. I take comfort when I look at some of these quotes and knowing that I've heard these students quoted by administration and some faculty in different venues. So I know that they're paying attention, because these quotes, they sting, they hurt, and they reverberate. And they did that for every subcommittee conversation that we had. It was always the students that we went back to, that we made sure we were focusing on, that we made sure we were giving and taking thoughtful action for. So I believe that BSU is becoming a regional leader as it focuses on providing the opportunity for our students to gather and engage in this meaningful work of fighting for justice, inclusion, and equity. With each forum and focus group, it was evident that we needed to do the work. And it's been fueled by the passion of our students, as you can see in these quotes, and the compassion of our administration as we feel in the engagement of this task force. We enjoy a diverse community, and it's rapidly developing. We owe it to our student body to ensure that they know that they are valued and never question whether it's just words on a website, but words that ring true with deeper meaning and the consequence of a brighter future. And now we will have reflections. I'll go last. Jakari, Gabrielle, Rivera, and Emily Patella. I've never been more proud in my 30+ years in higher ed than I was this year. I'm most indebted to all of the BSU students and alumni who spoke their truth about the racial injustice that they experienced at BSU last spring. Speaking truth to power was the lesson that I learned during the past 11 months, and I am grateful for an administration that actually heard our students and took action. And mostly, I'm appreciative of the alumni who empowered their undergraduate peers to not be silenced or settle for less. I really believe our students were heard. Thank you, Jakari.
I'd also like to offer my reflections for the past 10 months of my involvement as my involvement in Racial Justice Task Force. I can't help but comment on how important it was to include the voices of our many, many talented and caring and committed students. Their voice was absolutely essential and an essential part of the process. And I want to let you all know, I want to let them know that it is their voices that guided this work throughout. It is also their voices who are guiding our next steps toward change moving forward. Thank you.
Wonderful, Jakari and Cindy. Thank you so much for your reflections. And I will briefly give mine from a student perspective. I mean, ever since this task force was created, the students' voices were absolutely one of the most crucial aspects of the creation of this task force, because not only was it an awakening for our nation, but also on our campus when we realized that there was a lot more that needed to be done, acknowledging racial inequality on our campus. And what I truly appreciated as a female of color on this campus was that President Clark took the time to listen to our voices and understand the pain and frustration we were expressing. And I felt at the beginning of my time here at BSU at times that I felt ignored or invisible because of my race. But when this creation, this task force happened, I realized that other students were going through a similar phase. And I realized that this is our time to be heard and action is finally being taken. And what I look forward to, my work on the task force, I've loved being a co-chair for the subcommittee with Pam Russell. It's been incredible. It's made me become a vocal leader, and I'm really excited to use that for any other opportunities that come my way. And any suggestions or reflections that what I hope for in the future is, and to echo what President Clark said at the first town hall meeting, the work on this task force is not done. It's only the beginning, not the end. It's only the beginning. There's more to come for future students, faculty, staff that will come onto this campus, and anybody who wants to get involved, please, get involved, stay active, talk to people, do your part, use your voice. That's my suggestion, and that's absolutely what you should do to get involved. I know when I showed an interest in getting involved and I spoke up, it's been the best time of my life here on this task force. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sydney, Jakari, and Gabriella. I will echo what the many wonderful people who came before me said tonight. Those student voices acted as a catalyst for this endeavor, and it was only fair and right and just that the student voices be infused throughout the whole racial justice task force process. I am deeply honored that I was chosen to be a student leader as a co-chair. I don't say it lightly when I say that this task force changed my life. It changed me as a person, as a leader, as a student, and just a general human being. And I can't tell you how truly excited I am to see the fruits of our labor change BSU and every single person on campus, because that's what this is. This isn't just a Band-Aid. It's taking a look at each and every aspect of our institution and changing it for the better so we are racially just and equitable. And that's not an easy task. We will fail as us as humans fail, but we will also grow and be stronger. And for that, I couldn't be more proud to be a BSU Bear.
What I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to do is to orient you to this report. It's a lengthy substantive document filled with rich information and thoughtful commentary based on data and based on good questions, and excellent report by each of the subcommittees and the campus at large. It's 441 pages long. You will be able to, at the front of it, there's a very succinct executive summary, which takes a look at how we organize, the values that drove us, the process that we engaged in. It acknowledges the many individuals along the way who helped to put this together, who helped us to find data, who answered questions, and who responded to the call for information. And then it really does look at why we did this and why it was important. And what were some of the grounding documents, everything from the letter from the alumni to the Amplify event to the forums with our students. It is broken down into 6 executive summaries. Each one reflects the work of the individual subcommittees. And you can find the full report of each subcommittee in the exhibit section of the report. I would encourage you to read this deeply again and again, go back, because every time I know that I read through it, I learn more about what is in there and about how it will continue to strengthen BSU as we go forward. You will also find recommendations, and we have taken the time within each of the subcommittees. There are a series of recommendations, but also you will see that there's a crosswalk that we have established, which takes a look at how you can find recommendations broken down by each subcommittee, a particular response to an idea or a concern or a question. So this is really meant to give the readers who don't have as much familiarity yet with the document as all of us, a snapshot of where to go to and look in the report to find some of the things that may be top of mind for you. In all, there's 73 recommendations that were made across the 6 subcommittees. These are recommendations that are now being turned over to President Clark to consider, to reflect on, and to begin to think about how to prioritize and move forward. So again, I would encourage all of you to read this deeply and to know that in here, not only are there very solid recommendations, but these recommendations were based on findings of fact, of analysis, of data that we were able to examine. And in some cases, when we couldn't find data to follow through on, we cited that as something, as a finding that we needed to get more information to hold ourselves accountable and to understand where we were going. So take the time, review it from cover to cover, go back again, and think about how you can get involved in helping to carry forward the work as we go forward. So I'm going to now turn this over to David Alexander, who will begin to talk about some of the select recommendations, first from the work of the subcommittees, and then from the reflections of the co-chair. So David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. And in noting that there were 70 plus recommendations, one might think that, hey, some are lesser than others or anything like, or something of that nature, but there are no lesser ones. Each one are very important. Each one is very important for a very specific reason, given that all of it is driven by data and been analyzed, and the recommendation has come forth based on that. But my attempt this evening is to simply highlight a fraction of those recommendations in some of the subcommittees and how they have put them forward. Looking first to create a cabinet level position to increase accountability and visibility that is not just focused on students or academics, but essentially campus wide, to capture the entire environment, to look at the entire campus, to look globally and say to ourselves, like, what's influencing the culture here at BSU, the culture and the climate for that matter. We're going to update the core, or we recommend that to update the core curriculum. And then we also want to align our home team talent to the mission. We have people with expertise. Let's put them in a lane to make an impact on the campus community. And then looking towards establishing a Center for Racial Justice Research, Advocacy, and Support. We also look towards an active recruitment plan. And when you think of active recruitment, let's kind of switch that terminology a little bit and look towards strategic outreach. How we get the institution to leverage all of its assets to address representation and retention. So that's not just an HR function. That's not just a function of one department. That's everyone, all departments coming together to put together an end-to-end process on how we create networks that make people aware of BSU, both from a student perspective, a faculty perspective, a staff perspective. And then once they find their way into, via the interview process or admissions process, find their way into BSU and are loved and supported, and they thrive at BSU to either graduate or find long careers here. We have to strive to increase the percentage of the faculty, staff, and administrators of color, essentially address the representation issue. And we have to take intentional and innovative steps to retain our current employees of color who are already contributing so much to the university's transformation. How do we keep great people here and thriving? We have to develop specific mentoring programs for faculty and staff of color. And then we also look to provide incentivized education and development focused on racial equity of staff, faculty, and administrators. Looking at other subcommittee recommendations, further refine our institutional messaging to not just show us as a mosaic of identities, but have its language and its spirit truly reflect the existence thereof. So in other words, not having, folks on a brochure or anything like that to be used as props or as lip service, but instead, having the language, the feel, the spirit of everything that's produced within the university's communications to really reflect the diversity and the representation that exists and can thrive on campus. And then we also look to support the idea that we advance the recommendations of the Just Policing policies developed in partnership with the ACLU of Massachusetts. We also hope to promote and further create informal and parallel informal ways of reporting incidents that reduce dignity, enact racism, or just adversely affect BSU's culture. We know we have to be more innovative about how we communicate those paths, both those formal and informal paths of reporting incidents. We need to use technology. We need to meet people exactly where they are, right on their phones. And then, in part and parcel to that is the form of racial bias response team. We want to provide the opportunity for racial justice issues and racial justice inequities altogether to be funneled in a place and in a situation where we can see and understand it, be transparent about it, and be honest in going forward in how we rectify it. Just to give a short pause as we look towards more recommendations from the chairs, I'd like to invite Rania Lorjuste to give a few comments and reflection.
Thank you, David. Wow, this is such an amazing opportunity. I have, throughout the presentations, I have been reflecting my journey at BSU and what have gotten me here. From being from Haiti and then later transferring and being a transfer student at BSU, I just am so amazed that me as a psychology student got to be part of this committee. The reasons why I always say yes is because of this quote from Audre Lorde. The quote is, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important. Rather, I am afraid." This quote has navigated me through my journey at BSU, and it has navigated me through my journey at part of my committee, which was the co-curriculum committee. And I met amazing mentors and amazing students that are part of my committee. And just the impact and the change that I'm seeing at BSU, especially as a transfer student, as a Black student, as a student who is not originally from this country, and getting these opportunities that I didn't even think I would be able to get, and meeting these amazing mentors that I met that is part of my committee is really what kept me motivated through these long, hard journeys, especially hearing from other students of color, especially hearing from other students who felt they didn't have a voice at this school, who felt that their voice wasn't being heard, their voice wasn't being amplified, their voices were being shutted or weren't being listened to at all. So just me as a student having a say in the discussions that we're having was just the most amazing thing I could have thought about doing. It was a fear of mine to speak up, but I was able to do that through my committee and through the task force. So I thank you, and I thank everyone that has put so much effort and so much time in creating change at BSU. So thank you, and I will pass it on.
Thanks, Rania. Zahara Towson will offer her reflections next.
Hello, everybody. I was also on the curricular and co-curricular committee of the Racial Justice Task Force, and I just want to say this is such a full circle moment. All of our hard work has, paid off, and I'm happy to have been a student voice. My journey at BSU began in 2019, and when I first walked through the RCC hallways and saw the bulletin boards, I felt very underrepresented and out of place at my university. I felt like the bulletin boards were saturated with white faces, and that lack of representation made me want to fight for, change. And, it made me realize the importance of diversity and equity on our campus. I got involved with the Racial Justice Task Force because I wanted to ensure that future students on this campus feel comfortable and welcomed, and that they have the tools to succeed on this campus. Through our interviews with department chairs, we found out that many professors didn't feel that they had the tools that they needed to facilitate conversations around race, and that out of fear of saying the wrong thing, they would also often say nothing, or they would have students lead conversations. And for me, that's not the way that it should be. I think that as a result of the Racial Justice Task Force, I'm hoping that there will be more extensive and consistent trainings for faculty to educate them on how to engage in these conversations. I think that we really need to have an open forum and start having more conversations about race, and not making it such an elephant in the room, because that is the only way that we will see change. I also hope in the future that the university will have some kind of office where students and faculty can go to express the things that they don't know, things that they're struggling with, or any reactions that they're having, so that they are able to handle them in better ways than we are now. Thank you guys so much. Everybody on the task force has done such an amazing job, and kudos to us.
Thank you, Zahara. And thank you for your comments and your reflections. And now I'd like to invite Tina Malone to provide your reflection. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As a faculty member, I am grateful and proud to have been a part of the Police and Public Safety Committee. I have a lot of admiration for how our students, staff, and faculty are dedicated to enduring positive change. And as an African-American female faculty member, this left me hopeful that BSU will continue to make progress towards making not only a welcoming, but also encouraging community for people from all walks of life. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Tina. And Michael DeFau, I invite you to say a couple of words.
Thank you. Been in higher education for a while. I think it's natural at this point in time in the year that we would turn our minds toward commencement, and certainly with the upcoming commencement that's going to be at Gillette. That's pretty exciting. But everyone's looking forward to some kind of commencement at some point on this call, right? We're looking forward to that. Well, this document is a kind of commencement as well. It's the hard work lies ahead of us. It's not the hard work being done. We did stuff. What comes next is we've already heard. The real test. But we were asked to reflect on why we got involved with this. And the simple answer is you, the students. You're the reason we're doing this. And the reason any one of us would be signing up for this task. We've heard a lot about love. I think it's important to remember that love is not easy. It's not kisses on the forehead, flower petals, and bunnies. It's a radical, unconditional, and unending commitment to the actualization of another. And key to this, to the end state that we seek here, only love can make love possible. And thus the hard work that got us here is a thing to celebrate. It is a thing to celebrate. And it has been an honor. I got to serve on the task force committee, subcommittee 6, where we looked at making safe spaces. And the work being done was wonderful, and the people were extraordinary, but the real work is yet to come. And I know we embrace what comes next. And so again, thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael. We certainly appreciate that. And of course, the great Diane Bell.
Thank you, David. I was honored to have served as a co-chair along with Dr. Jabril Solomon of the Workforce Subcommittee. I consider myself a survivor of racial injustice as a first-gen woman of color who grew up in a low-income family on the south side of Chicago. I understand how these markers were used to discriminate against me and to reduce my opportunities for advancement in the workplace. But unlike you, our current students and our alumni, I never worried about racial injustice as a college student. I was nurtured on a campus, excuse me, community of faculty and staff who looked like me, as I'm a proud graduate of 2 historically Black colleges and universities. However, I understand your pain. As attending high school and college in the South, I experienced other forms of hatred and prejudice just because of the color of my skin. Your demands for a more just campus kept me focused on this work. I listened when you said, we want to see more faculty and administrators who look like us. Our subcommittee embraced the notion that bringing diverse lessons into the classroom and having diverse perspectives at the table when decisions are made is so important to the fabric and growth of our university. Our conversations about hiring practices were raw, honest, and at times difficult, but so is this work if you do it right. It forced us to recognize the importance and value of diversity in the classroom and in all spaces on our campus where we serve our students. It highlighted the additional responsibilities for those small numbers of faculty and staff of color on campus who are often called upon by our students of color who are seeking a mentor, looking for guidance, in need of counseling, or nourishment in the form of a snack in the late afternoon. Remember, we are always here for you no matter. In April, I met with a student to talk about internships, and we ended up talking about the task force. She asked me, is BSU really going to do something, or is this just a lot of talk? It is my hope that we will immediately implement some of the recommendations that may challenge the way we've always done things, but I believe it will be for the better. Our BSU community deserves change, and we deserve it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. So at this point, we'll look at some of the recommendations that the co-chairs, my colleagues, Dr. Mary Grant and Dr. Carolyn Petrosino, had to offer the community itself. And on this first slide here, with regards to those recommendations, there's just really one word that sums it up. It's accountability. It's how do we create accountable structures and sub-organizations that really move us towards the level of equity and inclusion that we all believe that BSU can achieve. So we're looking at accountability within the Board of Trustees structure. And as far as the Board of Trustees is concerned, this is significant because the Board of Trustees itself is ultimately responsible for the good and proper governance of the university itself. And so from an accountability standpoint, starting from that vantage point, it can then trickle down to the president and to the cabinet and filter out through the entire university itself. And we need to develop and implement a program focused on developing and refining the skills and qualities necessary for successful, inclusive leadership. And inclusive leadership, that's a term that is packed and dense with certain attributes. And that inclusive leadership could include empathy, ego management, intellectual curiosity, transparency, and cultural identity. And then the university council, and then as another recommendation, looking towards the university council being stood up to help provide that lateral accountability to the BSU community at large. And of course, being able to establish a multicultural student advisory group is something that could further support all the efforts of accountability. Further recommendations includes creating and bolstering and integrating those data streams all across the campus, and really having IR, institutional research, serve as a hub for all those data streams, so that information can be provided to help hold ourselves accountable, to help predict issues that may come up, and then also to look back and say where we have achieved and where do we need to improve. So all of that helps us move forward within creating the community that we want. We also need to establish new structures of accountability within each division itself. So looking down to those working areas within the purview of the lieutenants of the university, so to speak, making sure that they have the skills and the confidence necessary to uphold the values that we're talking about. And then, of course, putting everything all out in the open, a level of transparency and a way to see things so that as we make progress or as we fail, that we can see that and we can understand that, and there's nothing being left behind a veil. And again, going back to just the integrity of everything that in what we're trying to move forward. With all of that, it's time to invite and open the floor to a colleague and a friend who I've really gotten to know over this time period here, Sydney Morrow.
We are going to start this session with, this section with some reflections by some of my colleagues, and we're going to start with Kevin McGowan.
Good evening, Sydney and fellow colleagues. It's been an honor to serve on the co-curricular committee with Rania and Zahara. And as I reflect back on this year-long process, we've seen the word process in a couple of the slides here, and it makes me think about the Wallace model of creative processes. So there are 4 steps in this model: preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. And certainly, as I watched and worked with Rania and Zahara and the other members of our committee, all 4 of those steps were implemented. Had to be prepared, collecting data. We had to sit with the data between meetings in the incubation phase. We had illumination moments when we met, and verification is this 440-page report. But this is the first step in verification. The next steps in verification will be the implementation of these 73 recommendations. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Kevin. I will continue. We've heard others talk about the complex work that was undertaken and the hard conversations that transpired. And I am really confident that you will find all of that demonstrated in the 441-page document that I encourage you to read and reference as often as you can. Trust and believe. At every juncture, student voices were shared by the students on the subcommittees and through the qualitative data that came out of the various forums and student focus groups in which we've engaged in the last few years. I am really proud of my role as one of the 4 vice chairs who deliberately engaged week to week, month after month, Tuesdays with Mary, and to ensure that we left nothing on the table and did our due diligence in the quest for equity and racial justice. I am grateful to some of my colleagues who were as engaged as I'd hoped they'd be and who rose from the ranks of allies to accomplices. Let the work begin. The process was awesome, and I believe it really set the path for what we need to be the exceptional institution that I know we are. And now I'm going to hand it over to Anna Rice. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Sydney. Good evening, everyone. I was extremely honored to have joined this task force as the student vice chair. I joined this work because since coming to BSU, I've always believed that the voices of the students are the most important voices on campus. I joined because injustices and inequities were affecting and had been affecting our Alana students. It was absolutely crucial that we make BSU the best possible place it can be in order to ensure that our students are safe, comfortable, feel welcomed, or else they are not getting the education or experiences that they paid for. And this was very true reality for our students. As a vice chair and a member of Subcommittee 4 investing in and supporting students, I was able to provide student perspective where possible through my role as president of the student body, as well as take a step back and acknowledge that my personal experiences at BSU are not the same as our Alana students, and urging other members of the task force to hear their voices, which was always a priority and the reason we were there. I hope to see these recommendations fulfilled and upheld. Racial justice and equity is not something that we can address for a moment, but must be part of the structure and foundation of our university. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And now we'll hear from Samantha Joseph.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank President Clark for entrusting me and everyone on the force to put together this long and lengthy, amazing document. When I was asked to be a vice chair on the Racial Justice Task Force, I was honored. I agreed to take part because I knew that it was time for bigger changes to occur on the Bridgewater campus. I can still recall the discrimination that myself and many other alumni experienced as students. And to now hear how much it has continued, I knew I needed to be part of that change. A campus that helped me become the woman that I am today. I vowed when I returned to Bridgewater to be an active alumni, I would embody the motto that the Afro-American Alumni Association says, reflect, connect, make a difference. I felt my involvement as a vice chair to be an additional way to embody that motto and continue to affect change. I proclaim myself to be the quiet storm of the vice chairs. Just like a quiet storm, I would appear at the Tuesday meetings with chairs and vice chairs and at Fridays with our task force to make sure I kept my true voice heard throughout the discussion, but also made sure that other people's perspectives stayed true and heard as well. So we kept on our mission. My other form of help and my other part was to also make sure that our alumni always were updated on what was going on and how change was coming. I watched, I listened, I spoke. My mind has many fronts had to be managed. Talk about a quiet storm. My hope is that the task force recommendations will help current students to not feel the discriminatory walls that other alumni and I felt. Being an advocate for change means that accountability must occur. My plan is to make sure that there continues to be accountability for change for our students, alumni groups, and the Bridgewater community. The recommendations from this task force and the future for change are now in the hands of each one of you. When you see, hear, feel something, use your voice to be a racial and social just community. Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you, Samantha, Ms. Quiet Storm. And now we're going to hand it over to our other Quiet Storm, Mary Grant.
Thank you, Sydney, and thank you everyone for offering your reflections and your thoughts along the way. And Renia, I'm so moved by the Audre Lorde quote of use my strength in service of my vision. And I think that's exactly what this collective group has done. What you see before you are our steps, and we have taken many steps along the way. And today, the step that we're at is disseminating and sharing this report with all of you. It's a chance for you now, as Dr. McGowan said, to help do the verification, to read through it, to understand it, to have your own illumination. And now the report is in the hands of President Clark and the Board of Trustees, and an opportunity for the president to reflect and to begin to map out next steps, which you will hear some more about. And then it's upon all of us to ensure that this work continues, that we're sustaining it, that we're holding ourselves accountable, that we're, as Samantha said, we're reflecting and then we're connecting and we're making a difference. And the words that we heard throughout around hope, inclusion, equity, empathy, love, all of those are values that will help drive this work forward in the most positive ways as we hold one another accountable to do this work, to be a racially just and equitable institution, and to build on the strong foundation that is already here and the privilege to do this work together. So as we close out our time together this evening, I'm going to turn it over to Karim Ismaili and Joe Orovets. We'll first hear from Vice President of Student Affairs and then the Vice President of Academic Affairs, and then we'll be closed out by President Clark. So my thanks to all the members of the task force, and most importantly, thank you to all of you who will be continuing this work as we go forward. So over to Joe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Grant, and good evening, everyone. I hope you and your loved ones are safe and healthy as we start to finally see the light at the end of a very long pandemic tunnel. I'm looking very forward to seeing students back on campus this fall. We learn through what we experience. We need to assure our Alana students experience the sense of belonging. I had the great opportunity to serve on the subcommittee of investing in and supporting students, administrative and organizational support structures that was incredibly led by Dr. Sabrina Gentle-Warrior and Emily Pertello. We know that in this time of hyperpolarization, and racial strife in our country, it is incumbent upon us as a university, a community of learners, to actively, intensely, intentionally engage in an extended examination of the systemic use of power and privilege to oppress and disadvantage people in this country based on a racial hierarchy. Through the task force process, and you will read, and please do take the time to read, we acknowledge work has and is currently being done to advance anti-racist practices. However, much more work needs to be done, and we acknowledge that for our perspective and our returning Alana students and their families. The strength of the student voice is great and was heard throughout the task force process. And just in the words of our outgoing SGA President Anna Rice, it is the student voice that is the most important voice at Bridgewater State University. And students, we look very forward to even more of your involvement and engagement as we grow to be better. It is our commitment, and particularly with the continued work of every single staff member in the Division of Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, to being an anti-racist division, departments, and our collective and individual understanding of the importance and expectations we have of each other as members of the BSU community. As has been done in this past year and will be so into the coming years, our central core divisional priority, advancing the cause of racial justice and equity through the division by further broadening awareness and implementing continued change. This is our commitment. This is at the core of the integrity of our division and our work with students and families. Again, I'm looking very forward to seeing you in the near future, safe, healthy, to continue the momentum of this important and critical work for the success of you, our students.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, everyone. I want to take this opportunity to thank Mary Grant, David Alexander, Carolyn Petrosino, and every member of the Racial Justice Task Force for delivering such a comprehensive, searching, and thoughtful report. I also want to publicly thank President Clark for his vision and leadership. But most of all, I want to thank each and every student who participated in this process during one of the most challenging years in recent memory. That is truly remarkable. Thank you. Over the past year, the Division of Academic Affairs, working in partnership with the entire university, has engaged in deep dialogue and reflection on racial justice. Thanks to our community's commitment to equity and justice, we have held over 100 events demonstrating the very best of BSU. As a learning community, we have grown. I have been gratified by the engagement of you, our students, in these many events and conversations. In the Division of Academic Affairs, new racial justice initiatives have been launched across all colleges, institutes, centers, and most academic departments and units. As stated by President Clark, these efforts build on and extend what has already been done at the university, and we have a very strong foundation to build from. We have provided additional support to the Office of Teaching and Learning and to the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Scholarship, and will continue to provide resources to support racial justice and equity. You have my word on that. We have challenging work to do in relation to the core curriculum, diversifying our faculty, librarians, staff, and administrative ranks, deepening our commitment to providing more equitable and meaningful opportunities for our students, and ultimately doing justice to the work of the Racial Justice Task Force. That is our task. We are up to it. We have great momentum. The important thing for every student and every member of this community to do is to hold ourselves accountable to make sure we live up to our aspirations. I have confidence that we will seize this opportunity. I also just want to reflect on something, which is that racial justice and the experience of racism is something that is deeply personal. As provost, I want you to know that I have experienced this. I still, because of my name, because of my religion, am on watch lists. I can't leave the country without being verified by the Department of Homeland Security. When I was young, I experienced racial violence growing up. I have every confidence that this university means what it says when it talks about its commitment to racial justice. And as your provost, I want you to know that I'm deeply committed, both personally and professionally, to make sure that we are able to ensure that this is a place that everyone feels comfortable and everyone has a sense of belonging. So thank you. I want to just also note, there's a slide here. If you want further information on racial justice, please go to the website www.bridgew.edu/racial-justice. And if you have any questions about racial justice, about the task force, please email rjtf@bridgew.edu. It is now my distinct pleasure to send this to invite President Clark to present his final comments and reflections. Thank you, everyone.
Karim, thank you for sharing your personal story and for the powerful words. And before we go any further, I do want to thank IT and Harris and folks here in the President's office, Kelly Hess Salisbury in particular, for bringing us all together so effectively. I also want to thank our remarkable co-chairs, our vice chairs, committee leaders, and the 70 participants of the task force and the 1,000 folks across this campus that helped us to do this work. There's every reason to be optimistic and hopeful as we do this work together. These are hard questions. These are difficult conversations to have, but listen to our students. Listen to Gabriella and Emily and Anna and Renia and Zahara. What I've heard from them is that through these conversations, they felt empowered, engaged, involved, heard, and supported. That's what we want for every student on this campus without exception. And for our faculty and staff who were involved, and community members and alumni who were involved in these conversations, I've heard from you that even as we had these difficult conversations, we were able to build a sense of community and to strengthen the community that we have. There's every reason to be hopeful as we move forward. I do want to thank all of our panelists today for such inspiring and moving comments and testimonials and observations. And I do want to remind everyone, Gabriella said this too, but we're at the end of the beginning. The end of the beginning of this work. And this is a moment that really does mark the next phase of our work, which is the implementation. And we know we started with this, that words alone are not enough. And our students and faculty and staff of color have said very loudly, and Sydney Marrow underscored this, that they're tired of talking. They feel frustrated. They want and demand and should expect action. And action is what this effort is all about. We can't just write a report and then put it on a shelf. And that's not our intent at all. And one of our co-chairs said in a previous meeting, after all this work, I have 2 words for you and a question. Then what? Well, as a university, we have to be humble enough to know that we can improve, and we have to be brave enough to actually make change and to be bold in making that change. And as I've reminded folks today, earlier today, it's up to all of us. It's not just me. It's not just the provost or the student affairs vice president. It's up to each one of us as members of this community to turn our words into action, and then those actions into results that make a difference. Dr. Carolyn Petrosino said earlier today she wasn't able to be with us tonight, but she said that the effort is not going to be easy. She said that this work is demanding of our minds, our spirits, and our hearts. She's right. The next phase of this work will be just as demanding. But we are ready to take the next steps, I assure you. Earlier today, we had 400 folks from the campus community, faculty and staff from across the university, essentially take up the call to action and to make change. We do have to take time to reflect upon these recommendations, these 441 pages that Sydney just mentioned. We have to honor the work. We have to honor the thoughtfulness that went into the work. We have to read the report and reflect on it and think about what it means for us and for our future. But while we're doing that, I want to assure the campus and all of our students that we will take immediate next steps. You will hear from me in June in regards to next steps. There are next steps that can be taken. And later in June, Trustee Alexander, along with the Chair of our Board of Trustees, Jean Durgan, will be meeting in a retreat to talk about the accountability and oversight mechanisms that Trustee Alexander mentioned earlier. I welcome the oversight. I want to be held accountable. I want this campus to be held accountable so that this work endures, that it persists beyond our time here. We have to do further planning for implementation by the fall. That means realigning budgets, thinking about personnel, thinking through the training considerations that were discussed earlier. And yes, we will leave room. We weren't able to do it in this meeting, but we'll leave room and time for conversation and for your input along the way. We all should have faith in the work of this task force. I did from the beginning. I did throughout. And there's every reason to have faith in this work and to have faith in these recommendations. And I'll tell you why. Because the recommendations come from our BSU community. And they're offered, and you heard it several times tonight, they're offered with a sincere passion. And I'm not afraid to use the word. It's offered with sincere love for this great university and for our deserving students that we're privileged to serve. So as we move forward to implement these task force recommendations, let's be reminded of our common motivation. Our motivation is to assist BSU in achieving our full potential, the full potential of our mission, and living up to our highest ideals as a truly caring, welcoming community within which every member feels the sense of belonging, feels a sense of belonging, and feels that sense of love that we talked about. So I'm going to end, and I'm going to paraphrase our good friend Renia, who beautifully brought forward Audre Lorde's poem, but I'm just going to modify it a little bit. Renia, don't be mad at me. But let me rephrase it in this way. When we dare to be powerful, to use our strength in the service of our vision for racial justice, then it becomes less and less important whether we are afraid, and I'll add, to make change. Let's not be afraid to make the change that we all know needs to be made. So I want to thank all of our students, our alumni, our task force members, the presenters. Thank you so much for coming together tonight. I hope that you'll take some time to rest, to rejuvenate, to reflect on this past year and these 15 months. Think about all of what we've accomplished together in this year and what we hope to accomplish together in the year and in the months ahead. And if you're a senior, let me just say congratulations, and I look forward to seeing you at Gillette. Take care, everybody. Thanks again.